Bumpy Johnson knew he was dying. The chest pains had been getting worse for weeks. July 9th, 1969. He woke up knowing it might be his last day. But he went to Monroe's restaurant anyway. Same table, same breakfast. Because the Colombo family had sent word. They wanted a meeting about heroin, about Harlem's future, about what happens when the king dies. Bumpy could have stayed home, spent his last hours in peace. Instead, he sat across from 3 mob enforcers and made a choice. Protect his legacy or protect his life. He couldn't do both. He chose Harlem. If you walked through Harlem in the summer of 1969, heroin was creeping into the streets like poison gas, and everyone knew where it was coming from. The Italian mob, specifically the Colombo crime family. For 30 years, Bumpy Johnson had kept that poison out. He ran the numbers, controlled the gambling, kept the peace. But he had one rule that never bent. No heroin in Harlem. Not in his neighborhood. Not while he was breathing. But in 1969, Bumpy wasn't breathing so well anymore. He was 63 years old. His heart was failing. The doctors had told him 6 months ago, slow down, retire, enjoy what time you have left. Bumpy had laughed. Retire. A man like me doesn't retire. He dies working. The Colombo family knew this. They'd been watching him, waiting. Vincent Colombo himself was locked up in federal prison, dying of a heart condition just like Bumpy. But his family was still powerful, still hungry, and they saw an opportunity. Harlem without Bumpy Johnson. That was an open market, a gold mine waiting to be claimed. The young soldiers thought it would be easy. Just wait for the old man to die, then move in. But the older bosses knew better. They knew Bumpy Johnson was more dangerous dying than most men were in their prime. So they decided to try negotiation first. On July 9th, 1969, 3 men in expensive suits got into a black Cadillac in Little Italy and drove uptown to Harlem. Their names were Frankie Bones Marconi, Thomas, Tommy Cash Romano, and a young soldier named Vinny Gallo. They were armed, they were connected, and Tommy Cash was carrying a black leather briefcase containing $100,000 in cash. They had no idea they were driving to their own humiliation. Monroe's restaurant sat on the corner of 134th Street and 7th Avenue. Red leather booths worn smooth by decades of use, black and white checkered floor, the smell of bacon grease and coffee. But it was Bumpy's place. His table was in the back corner, facing the door, always facing the door. That morning, Bumpy was alone. His wife Mayme had begged him not to go. But Bumpy had kissed her forehead, straightened his tie, and told her he'd be home by noon. He always wore a suit, even for breakfast. Respect, he'd say. He ordered his usual, scrambled eggs, crispy bacon, wheat toast, black coffee. He was reading the Amsterdam news when the restaurant door opened, and those 3 men walked in. The entire restaurant went quiet. The waitress, Louise, stopped mid-pour. Everyone in Harlem knew what Italian suits in a black neighborhood meant. Bumpy didn't look up from his newspaper. He took a slow sip of coffee, turned the page with deliberate calm, and waited. He'd been expecting this. Frankie Bones walked over first. Tommy Cash stayed by the door, the briefcase in his hand. Vinny stood behind Frankie, trying to look hard. "Mr. Johnson," Frankie said, "mind if we sit?" Bumpy folded his newspaper slowly. He looked up with those cold, calculating eyes that had stared down mob bosses for 30 years. Then he gestured to the booth. Free country. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Across the street in a parked Buick, 2 of Bumpy's men sat watching. Big Willie Turner and Raymond Slim Davis. Bumpy never went anywhere without backup. Frankie nodded to Tommy Cash, who placed the black leather briefcase on the table. The latches clicked open. Inside were stacks of $100 bills. "Mr. Johnson," Frankie said, "we come with respect, with a business proposition." Bumpy didn't touch the briefcase. His eyes stayed locked on Frankie's face. "I'm listening. The world is changing, Mr. Johnson. The young people don't want numbers anymore. They want heroin." Frankie gestured to the briefcase. "Whether you like it or not, it's coming to Harlem. We've got connections in Marseille, Turkey, Southeast Asia. The product is going to flow. The only question is, who controls it?" He pointed to the money. "This is $100,000 in cash, and it's just the down payment. We're offering you 30% of all heroin profits in Harlem. You don't have to do anything. Just stop blocking us. Let us operate. Everybody eats." The briefcase sat there. Real money, serious money, enough to take care of Mayme for the rest of her life, enough to die comfortable. But Bumpy Johnson had never cared about dying comfortable. Vinny, the young one, couldn't keep his mouth shut. "Mr. Johnson, with all respect, you're not a young man anymore. Why fight this? Take the money. We're going to do this with or without you." That's when Bumpy's eyes shifted to Vinny, and the temperature dropped 10 degrees. "How old are you, son?" Bumpy's voice was quiet. 26. Bumpy nodded. You know how old I was when I walked into Lucky Luciano's office and told him he couldn't touch Harlem without my permission. 29. 4 years older than you. That was 1936, 33 years ago. And here I am, still breathing. And Lucky? Lucky died in Italy in 1962. Heart attack, just like the one that's going to kill me. He looked at Frankie. Where's Vincent Colombo right now? Frankie shifted uncomfortably. He's in federal prison. Leavenworth, heart disease, just like me. Dying same as me. Bumpy smiled without warmth. Funny how that works. Mr. Johnson, times change. Frankie tried. The old ways. Bumpy's voice cut like a razor. You think you're offering me something new? Heroin isn't new, Frankie. It's been knocking on Harlem's door since the 20s. And every single time, I slammed that door shut. You know why? Frankie didn't answer. Because I've seen what it does. I watched it destroy Chinatown in the 30s. I watched it hollow out neighborhoods in Chicago. I watched it turn human beings into walking corpses. And I made a promise to this community that as long as I was breathing, that poison wouldn't flow freely through Harlem. He reached across and closed the briefcase. The latches clicked shut. Then he pushed it back toward Frankie. I don't want your money, and I don't want your poison in my neighborhood. Tommy Cash spoke up, his voice harder. Bumpy, be reasonable. You can't stop this. You're one man. We're an organization. We've got muscle, connections, politicians. What do you have? Bumpy looked at each of them and smiled. Not warmly. It was the smile of a man who'd seen death before and wasn't afraid of it. Let me tell you something about Harlem, Bumpy said. You think it's just another neighborhood to exploit. Harlem is a promise. A promise to the people who built it. A promise to the kids growing up in these streets that there's another way besides drugs, besides destroying yourself to make white men downtown rich. He pointed at the briefcase. You bring that garbage into Harlem. You're not just selling drugs. You're selling death. You're selling hopelessness. You're taking young men who could be doctors, lawyers, teachers, and you're turning them into addicts and corpses. Mr. Johnson, we're businessmen. Frankie started. You're murderers. Bumpy's voice filled the room. Don't dress it up with words like business. You're murderers. You sell poison. You destroy families. And you want me to shake your hand and help you do it. The pain in his chest was starting now. A tightness, a pressure. His left arm was tingling. He knew what was coming, but he wasn't done talking yet. Here's my answer, Bumpy said, looking each man in the eye. You can bring your heroin to Harlem over my dead body. And even then, the people I've taught will fight you every step of the way. You'll never control Harlem. Not while there's one person left who remembers what I stood for. The pain was getting worse. His breathing was becoming difficult. He leaned forward, his eyes locked on Frankie Bones, and said 7 words that would be repeated in Harlem for 50 years. Harlem doesn't bow. Not now. Not ever. The pain hit him like a sledgehammer. Bumpy's hand flew to his heart. His coffee cup slipped and shattered on the floor. Louise screamed from behind the counter. Oh God, somebody call an ambulance. The restaurant door burst open. 4 men walked in. Big Willie Turner led them, his 6'4" frame filling the doorway. Behind him came Raymond Slim Davis, Marcus the Deacon Williams, and Cleveland. They'd been watching from across the street. When they saw Bumpy grab his chest, they came running. Big Willie's eyes went from Bumpy clutching his chest to the 3 Italians to the briefcase. What did you do to him? Big Willie's voice was pure murder. Frankie went pale. Nothing. We were just talking. He just grabbed his chest. I swear, you brought poison to his table. Big Willie stepped closer. You disrespected him in his own neighborhood. And now he's dying right in front of you. That's when they understood. 3 Italian mobsters sitting across from Bumpy Johnson when he has a heart attack in Harlem. They'd be torn apart before the ambulance arrived. Tommy Cash was already backing toward the door. Vinny's hand started to go toward his gun, but Big Willie caught his wrist. You pull that gun, boy, and you'll never leave this neighborhood. Through his pain, Bumpy managed to speak. His voice was barely a whisper. Let them go. Big Willie looked down at him. Boss, let them go. Bumpy's breathing was ragged. I want them to tell their bosses. He looked at Frankie. Tell them, Harlem doesn't bow. Big Willie stepped back, creating a path to the door. Frankie grabbed the briefcase, and the 3 Italians ran. Out the door, into their Cadillac, tires squealing as they burned rubber getting out of Harlem. Behind them, Louise was at Bumpy's side, holding his hand, tears streaming down her face. Big Willie was yelling for someone to call the hospital. Bumpy looked up at Louise and managed to smile. Tell Mayme, he whispered. Tell her I'm sorry I missed lunch. Those were his last words. At 8:54 a.m. on July 9th, 1969, Bumpy Johnson's heart gave out. 5 minutes after the meeting. 5 minutes after he said no to $100,000. 5 minutes after he chose principle over survival. He died sitting in his booth at Monroe's restaurant. He died surrounded by his community. He died free, unbought, unbowed. The funeral was 5 days later at Abyssinian Baptist Church. More than 5,000 people came to pay their respects. The line stretched for 6 blocks. Frankie Bones kept that black leather briefcase for the rest of his life. Never opened it again. Never spent a single dollar. He kept it in a safe in his basement in Queens. When young mobsters would come to him for advice, he'd take out that briefcase and show them the money. This, he'd say, is what happens when you disrespect a king. Bumpy Johnson was dying. We offered him a fortune, and he chose to die rather than take it. That's honor. That's principle. Monroe's restaurant closed in 1984. Before they tore the building down, a group of Harlem residents commissioned a small brass plaque, Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson, 1906-1969. The man who never bowed. In this place, he chose honor over life. Today, if you walk through Harlem, you'll still hear his name. Old-timers tell stories about the time Bumpy faced down Lucky Luciano, about the morning he sat across from the Italian mob and said no with his dying breath. The stories aren't always accurate. Details get mixed up. Legends blend with facts. But the essence remains true. Once, Harlem had a king who couldn't be bought. Once, a man chose his community over his comfort. Once, someone showed the world that some things matter more than money, more than power, more than life itself. On July 9, 1969, Bumpy Johnson's heart stopped beating, but his words kept echoing. Harlem doesn't bow, not now, not ever, and 55 years later, those words still mean something. They still inspire. They still remind us that we have choices. We can stand up. We can say no. We can choose principle over survival, even if it costs us everything.